I had thought of a clever title I thought, which was how to maximize your taxes. And our guest, who I'll get to in a second, said like, well, actually, you want to maximize your savings and minimize your taxes. Everybody in. It's another Nice Job live chat here on the Nice Job Podcast. We are so glad that you're here, taking some time out of your day, out of your evening, wherever you're catching us right now. And if you're watching on the replay, good on you as well. But if you're catching us live, this one in particular, now every episode we stream live, you're able to comment below, submit a question, anything like that. This one in particular, I feel like we might see some more questions filter in because we're going to be talking about your business and talking about your taxes. Let's get to the guest, right? I mean, if you just want to see me talk, I can do that on the weekends. We'll just have a solo show of just me. But my guest today is the co-owner of Wasatch CPA Services. It is Lisa Bloomfield, joining us from Utah, if I'm not mistaken. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me here on the Nice Job Podcast.
Thanks for having me here, Sean. I appreciate that.
And so we're talking taxes and we're talking, kind of business finances at large, things like that. And I kind of hinted at it that I'm not very experienced with taxes. It tends to frustrate me. I tend to rely on professionals. So what I'd love to do with this conversation is, I think a recommendation is, hey, if you're in an ability to have, a professional help you, that is dedicated that's what they're doing day in and day out. That's probably some sound advice. You probably both recommend that. But I'd really love to dive into kind of all around of, hey, there's a bunch of different angles you kind of can approach some of these things. And perhaps here's some things you need to keep in mind or some things that kind of help you along the way. So don't feel like you have to tackle it alone, but if you're listening to this and you're thinking about doing it, hopefully Lisa will give you some good advice here. And I guess it's safe to qualify that every situation is going to be unique. Lisa, perhaps I'll do that for you. A little caveat that the advice we're giving is, a bit general. There'll be some good tips, but make sure that you're always looking at your situation as a unique one in its own. I asked all my guests, and Lisa, I think it's fair to ask you as well. How did you get driven into this field, or what brought you to, being a co-owner of your business today, and what made you, kind of want to go in this field, and what excitement do you get out of it?
I kind of fell into it. I was at 19 years old when I applied for a job to be a secretary who happened to be a CPA. I didn't know I was working for a CPA. In fact, I don't think I could have told you what a CPA was. At that point, I don't know that I had done any of my own taxes. My parents actually owned a business, and so I just gave my tax documents to them, and it just magically happened. I didn't know anything about it. So I started working for this CPA, and so I'm learning a little bit about, mostly on the putting tax returns together. And so he had, back in the day, but way before the internet, he gets to go to clients' offices a lot. And he's like, there's this new software called QuickBooks. And it's got this big instruction book. He slides it across the desk. And he's like, if you'd like to kind of teach yourself how to use this, that would be great. 25 years later, that's pretty much how that happened, because turns out I was a secret accounting nerd and I didn't know it. And that software was it was like a big puzzle. And there was a literal shoebox of stuff. So I'm putting it all in and seeing how it all works together, and the little puzzle pieces go together nicely. And I was like, oh, that is so much fun. And then we get into the world of taxes. And so now I'm starting to learn how to do tax prep. Once you have already worked for a CPA, every other CPA in the world who's hiring is like, you have experience in our field. It's very specific. They love it. And so I've pretty much only worked for CPAs since then. There's a really small gig where I did something else, but at 28, I owned my own business. I was doing tax prep, and actually didn't go back to school till I was 25, didn't finish my degree till I was 32. And so, and that was more than a decade ago. So for me, it's just been working for CPAs, just hands-on, and working with a lot of business owners. So I fell into it and I love it.
I love that, because you talked about once I started working with it, I kind of discovered that, okay, a little bit of a knack, and I kind of enjoyed what I was doing. But when you talked about, hey, learn this software and it's going to give you not only the ability to do it, but kind of understand what's happening through it. That's great. Sometimes what software can do is makes things a bit quicker, but you kind of learn a along the way. I'm sure what you've also learned over the course of your career is you probably heard a good amount of interesting questions or different questions, or perhaps just some myths that won't die. Is there one that comes to mind when someone brings it up, like, hey, what's a big tax myth, or what's something that a lot of business owners might come to you and ask this question, and you're like, look, if I can make the national FAQ right now, I'm starting with this question. What is that question that you get most often?
If they pay with cash, I don't have to report that as income, right? Yes. Unfortunately, if you are selling a product and you are paid in cash, you're paid in Bitcoin, you're paid in dog food, you're paid in whatever, there has a value, you have to report it on your taxes. Even if it's trade, you have to report that. So that's the biggest one. And then I had one lady who was like, I heard if it's under 3,000, you don't have to report it. I'm like, no, that's not how that works either. We can get into hobby rules. We can get into, expenses and whatever separately, but I'm like, technically you do have to report it. So so the big difference is going to be hobby versus business. But if you're in business, the activity of your business is reportable regardless of how you're paid.
I also think sometimes there's some reservations because, like I mentioned, a lot of professionals in a field will have the up-to-date news, things like that. But if you're already scared or intimidated by numbers and financials, news about tax changes or tax code or things like that, you're probably scrolling on by. Or I did the flip of newspaper. Remember those? You're probably scrolling on by. I don't want to dive too much into nitty-gritty because there's a lot that could happen. But in my perspective, I know a lot last year seemed just to me, casually looking at the news, that there was new types of loans and new changes and things like that. How much has the landscape really changed over the past year or so? Let's just say from, filing taxes this year versus filing last year. Has there been significant changes, or has it just been a lot of news and noise out there?
There has actually been a significant number of things that can impact your tax filing. If you received a PPP loan, if you received an EIDL, either advance or loan, if you happen to tell your payroll company that one of your employees had COVID and they're like, great, you're going to get a credit, blah, blah, blah. They do something funny on your payroll forms. They look a little different. All that impacts your taxes a little differently. But it's from even before this, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the Trump taxes, that actually significantly changed the landscape. And so in the last 4 years, doing your own taxes, I honestly don't recommend to a business owner that they even try. It is kind of like trying to fix your own car. You're going to waste a lot of time, bloody a lot of knuckles, and at the end of the day, your car's probably going to be broken in pieces worse than it was before. We hire professionals, and taxes kind of moved into that realm more for a business owner. Very easy to make that a justified expense. You will always be happy about it if you really understand what you're diving into.
So I never like to truly date the episodes, but I think in this instance, it's a little appropriate. So we're beginning of March. Deadline is super close to things like that. Is there a top 3 things, something like that if someone's kind of been like, look, I've got so much going on, never even thought about it, of like, I understand that, but hey, right now, early March, this, and this need to be done, or make sure you have this ready to go and pass on to your preparer, anything like that. So what's the action plan for right now, early March?
If you file as an S corporation, if you have partners in your business, so you file as a partnership, you are a C corporation, those tax returns are due March 15th. Now, typically those organizations do not actually pay taxes on their own. It passes through to the owners. But if you don't ask the government pretty please on an extension to file your business entity tax return, you could hit a penalty that is several $100s just simply because you didn't file a business tax extension. So then you have another 6 months until September 15th to file that. Typically, a lot of people will file an extension of their business return so they can go ahead and file it with their personal return, which is due regularly April 15th. That is not ever a bad idea. So I just recommend, hey, pay attention to what kind of entity you are. If you made an S Corp election, file that extension if you don't have a tax preparer already doing it. And it doesn't hurt to email them, bother them, whatever, just to make sure it gets done. Because it is super annoying to get a $600 penalty for a failure to ask pretty please to file your tax return a month late.
Yeah. Yeah, no, avoiding penalties. That goes back to maximize your taxes, actually maximizing your savings. Paying penalties, right. I don't think ever ends up in a savings in any language or any currency or anything like that. Right. Pulling out a bit and going a bit more broader. This is a question that I always had, and I don't know if any other business owners had out there, but is there really, I don't want to say one way to do taxes because situations are unique, but are there different strategies when it comes to taxes as opposed to like write-offs or things like that that might help? I know for me, from the personal standpoint, there was a point in my life where taxes were always very stressful because I'm like, look, I need as much cash as I possibly can at the moment. You know, like in a couple of months, I might be kind of okay, or next year it might be great, but like right now I need more cash in hand versus, you know, something that might cost me down the line. So is there a strategy, or is this something I'm just made up of, like taxes that perhaps could help short-term versus help long-term or anything like that? Or is that just a crazy thing I thought up of?
No, there really is a lot that can be done. I mean, my firm specializes in tax strategy and tax planning, and tax prep is just one of those necessary things that we do as well, because it's becoming a very real thing that a business needs to consider, at least quarterly is usually what I do with my clients, is, okay, where are we at in all the aspects of your tax paying? Business, personal, and a lot of business owners, you know, us entrepreneurs and whatever, we can't keep our hands out of things. We could have real estate, we could have stocks, we could have, you know, retirement accounts. We're pulling money from multiple places. We got investors and stuff like that. Our world gets crazy, and it's good to have a, you know, taking a snapshot of that at least every quarter, knowing where we're at, what is the tax obligations, what can we put off. For people who are always trying to maximize their financial investment in their business at all times, I actually kind of recommend that if you are an entity like an S Corp where you have to do a minimum payroll, that we kind of throughout the year embed the federal and state estimated withholdings out of those payroll checks, just because it's a nice way to just get it evenly spread out throughout the year, and you don't have to actually physically write a check to the United States Treasury or whoever your tax person is.
Yes, it's interesting because I, you know, like I said, I didn't know that was something that was kind of far-fetched of kind of different ways to do it. But I just remember, you know, I said from the personal standpoint of having some kind of short-term, you know, needs or anything like that.
I don't know any business owner who wants to, I'm sorry, I don't know any business owner who voluntarily wants to send money to the IRS. They're more afraid of getting in trouble, but all business owners are all about putting their money back into their business. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, that's long as I'm saying, you know, like I would love to have an extra little bit, but two things is one, I don't want to get in trouble of something where I find out down the line I was playing too much in a gray area, or consequently of like, yeah, you might be able to do that now, but at some point, you know, you got to pay the piper or whatever phrase you want to use. Is there something, I don't want to use the word loophole because I feel like it sounds so like schemy, but is there something that not enough business owners are taking advantage of that is going to help them save? And perhaps if someone is unaware of it, something that should look into, you know, maybe for this year if it works with their particular business?
Right. Well, there's actually a number of them. And so, well, and the thing you're not looking into is the IRS code, which is, you know, only, you know, a few million lines and, you know, several tens of thousands of pages. Yeah. But there's easily like 160 some odd strategies just right off the top of our head that could apply to most businesses. And so what we like to do is, okay, let's just go through and we want to ask you all about your entire situation. Not just income level and expenses. I mean, what industry are you in? And do you apply for any of these extra kind of credits? For my people in real estate, we're looking at cost segregation. Are we thinking about a 1031 exchange? If you're in trades and maybe you have projects that go really long, well, are we talking about not doing cash basis or accrual, but we want to do something like percentage of completion? This works really well with builders, things like that. And so as we're doing these different types of things, but then there's just a lot of strategies out there. And if you Google just tax strategies, you get some of the books, you're probably hearing them, you know, buzzwords that are Augusta strategy, accountable plan, and all of these things. Those are all very real. They all should be utilized to some extent in most businesses. And the main thing where I tell people, I'm like, I can tell you the name of all the strategies, and all you have to do is make sure you know how to implement them and document them so they're audit proof. And that's what people are like,
yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, all you have to do is just make sure that you do it according to what the IRS wants. And that's where it helps to pay a professional, because it's like your accounting can be done on Excel. Why does QuickBooks still make money? Because they are simplifying it and putting it together in a format you already want. So that's kind of where we come in. Like, we're helping you make sure it's done correctly. So
yeah, and I said it. The one thing about professionals, and especially those that know how to use those software, things like that, like it's what you're kind of doing over and over and over. I'm sure a lot of our home service professionals out there, our carpet cleaners and our window cleaners, really rally behind, where you're like, yeah, you can wash your own window, like you can do your carpet, but if you got the thing that you need to get right, you got the in-laws coming over and you need everything spotless, you're probably calling a professional in that regard. I wanted to circle back. You talked about, you want to do things based on the IRS code, but you just want to make sure that you're doing it in a way that's not going to lead to an audit. One mindset I know that's out there that I wonder if you could shed some light on, or I'd love to get your opinion on, is the IRS, does it have a lot of gray area, or is it very cut and dry? Because I think the biggest thing people worry about the audit is they think of almost the sitcom-y sort of thing of, you forgot to dot this I and cross this T, like you're going to jail. But then they also hear about, big corporations paying a tiny little bit of money and things like that. In your experience, I know you never want to try to, scheme or gray area, you want things cut and dry, but is there processes in place that avoid simple mistakes, or, is it really important to kind of to bear down? What is your assessment of the IRS's personality, I guess?
It really is. It's not quite so black and white, because no business is black and white. So it's not that the IRS has left it all gray because they're like, aha, you can go ahead and just play with it however you want. No, it's that they left it so that it is broad enough to encompass all the businesses in the United States and all of the different things that could happen for your different industries. What is e-commerce isn't the same as, home builders is not the same as a person who owns a restaurant. So all these different industries, the code is meant to be flexible in all of those. And this is where your professional knows that that gray area can be utilized better in one industry than in another. And you might look at it and go, it's just this. Or you talk to your friend who does a completely different business and he does this. Well, I'm just going to do that too. That might not be the best for you. It's knowing that it is meant to be flexible. It's meant to be breathable. And it does really kind of change throughout, year to year, depending on whose percentages and what's going on. Going to jail, honestly, if you withhold payroll taxes from people and you send them to the government, you will probably never go to jail for not paying your income tax. They might send you a lot of nasty letters for a little while, and you have Christmas with the IRS is a little weird, but you will never go to jail usually. So, just know that there is a lot of things, and those tax strategies that are in there where the corporations that don't pay zero taxes, they're not doing illegal things. None of these strategies are illegal. It's just that there are so many of them and you need to know how to implement them. And if you go to your regular CPA, and your regular CPA's got the best price in town, he is the cheapest guy who's going to do business taxes, and he's got 1,000 people standing at the door. So you see two people doing 1,000 tax returns, you're getting 1.5 hours of his time, maybe. That's not going to include him giving you instruction. That's not going to include him taking the time to help you put these things in place. And therefore, he's probably not going to do it. You need to go be willing to pay that person who spends time with you, who will actually take you through, setting it up. So relationship, however much you want to pay for the relationship with your tax preparer is really going to hinge upon how much they can help you and how much time they can help you utilize the IRS code to your advantage.
And you mentioned that in your particular case that it's not just tax preparation, but also tax strategy kind of throughout the year. So let's say, the people that they have a good handle on what they're about to file, either in March or April, whatever their deadline would be. Let's talk to the people that are going to be preparing for next year. Is there anything that in the recent news or things like that perhaps business owners should be mindful of or aware of, or something perhaps that if a strategy that needs to be acted on now to really impact or have a noticeable benefit for, I guess, your 2021 taxes that you pay in 2022? That part always confuses me too. Yeah, is there anything that people should be doing now?
Exactly. A lot of it should be done now. For most people, we actually, who work with us, we want to talk to them every 3 or 4 months And we're wanting to do tax planning now that some of it can benefit 2020. So if you haven't filed your 2020 taxes and you're like, oh my gosh, my bill's going to be high, there could be something that can be done for that year. So don't just like file your taxes cheap and then go talk to someone. Put yourself on extension and then go talk to someone and see if they can help you. But if you're planning for 21 and forward, then now is a great time to start thinking about that. Because anything we wanted to do that involved changing your entity structure, then we want to go ahead and we want to consider maybe adding payroll in there. Maybe you actually want a business retirement plan. Some of those can take months to set up. And then getting all the paperwork done. Well, if it has to be done before December 31, you want to be on top of that before end of August. So now is a great time to be getting a plan so that you're not running and trying to do it all real quick. Because we all know the year just disappears before we know it. Even in a pandemic, the year just disappeared, which was really sort of disappointing. Like it was supposed to drag out forever and it never did. And so for your year, yeah, just start planning now. And then be willing to dedicate a little bit of time talking to your tax professional and any of the other professionals they feel like you need in your business, attorneys and retirement and that kind of stuff, because it will save you. It can save you a lot of money, especially if you're approaching 6 figures of net income. You were risking leaving a lot of money on the table to save yourself a couple hours being able to keep doing your job. Where, unless you're going to, until I ask people, I'm like, unless you made $20,000 or $30,000 in that few hours that you decided to skip out on a meeting with me, that'd be the only way that would be justifiable. So.
Yeah, that's some pretty good advice there to talk about, what is your time actually worth? And I think in this instance, I think that's probably a proper figure on there, that unless you're making that big a bank and that small thing, it's certainly good to sit down with your tax professional and kind of get all these things in a row. And I really appreciate, at least, that I feel that you conveyed, which whenever I talk to, professionals like yourself, I'm always kind of interested in, because you talked about, like, hey, yes, it can seem complicated, things like that, but it's not something you have to fear. It's not something that you should be afraid of approaching. And also, it's something that if you're just going to put off, is never really going to fix itself. So sometimes you just got to dive in, ask for help or something like that. But it's great to hear that there are strategies that are going to help beyond perhaps, whenever the next due date is. And that, the flexibility even within, businesses that are the same or different sizes, that it's maybe not as complicated as it's not as complicated or not as scary as it is, perhaps some complicated from time to time, but it really, I think, helped, a lot of our listeners kind of settle in. If anyone, I know this type of episode, we could go on for 3 hours and talk about 900 different topics. And I wouldn't be surprised if I end up reaching out to you again for a part 2 on this episode, maybe a little bit later down the year. But for now, if someone's listening in and they want to reach out, get in touch with you, either pick your brain or look into your services professionally, where should we direct them to?
Probably our website, which is wasatchcpaservices.com. You can find my name. You can Google me, Lisa Bloomfield. I am not the artist in Orange County, but I am in lots of places. You'll see the accountant. Also, my business partner is Gene, Gene Bot CPA. So either one of us, you'll find us on LinkedIn, you'll find us on Facebook, you'll find us in lots of places. So Wasatch CPA Services. We are located in Utah, but we work with business owners all over the United States. If you are in any of the U.S. territories, or if you're U.S. residents who happen to have stuff going on in other countries, we help with that too. So.
Awesome. That's great. And if you're watching us on the live, I'll put that information down in the comments in just a little bit here. If you're watching on the replay, it should already be there. And obviously, if you're watching on YouTube or listening to the audio only, just check the show notes and descriptions. You'll see the appropriate links there as well. Well, Lisa, thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it. And it was a real pleasure talking to you. And I know our audience is going to get a lot out of this conversation.
It was great talking to you guys. So have a good day.
Thanks again, Lisa. And for all of you that took your time to tune in today, we're really appreciative of you. I've been mentioning we're getting closer and closer to the end of season 2, which reminds me, actually, Lisa, I forgot to ask you the question that I've been asking everyone in season 2. And so I want to make sure I get this in. And for those that have listened before, they know what the question is going to be. And the concept behind the question is, we have so many experts and they have such great knowledge, but I know that experts are always working on something they don't know. So that's my question to you, Lisa. What don't you know now that you're either working on finding the answer to, or just excited to get to explore?
Oh, all of the Biden tax changes that are about to come down. So we'll probably see something in the next 12 months. Lots of things swirling around. And then the PPP, SBA loans, what's forgivable, how are they going to apply it? That's all something we are keeping a very close watch on and educating ourselves on, because it's pretty much changing every time the Congress gets together and actually agrees on something. So.
Yeah, which, sometimes it's few and far between when they're actually agreeing on things. But that's a whole nother different podcast, Lisa. Well, it's great. And again, if you heard that answer and you were like, oh man, that would blow my mind. Well, that's what Lisa and professionals like her are working on, keeping up to date on all these things. So you don't have to have any fear or anything like that. So Lisa, thanks again. And for all of you, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back with another episode next Thursday. If you like what you heard here, feel free to share it with another fellow business owner. Drop a comment. You can also review this podcast. Us, reviews are so important. We want to make sure that we're getting some here on our podcast as well. But until then, we hope you're being healthy. We hope you're being safe. And don't forget to have a little fun out there as well. Take care, everybody.